This is the question I had when the Niners drafted him. I think it's the question the entire league had, and it's the reason he was the last pick in the draft. Is Brock Purdy's arm strong enough?
That's a key question, and my answer is a resounding hell yes.
Yeah.
I think it is.
I didn't think so at first, but now I agree. Go ahead.
I think you have to come back to Joe Montana. And in this system, Joe Montana's arm was not particularly stronger than Brock Purdy's. Would you agree, Iggy?
I would absolutely agree. And I've talked to people who played catch with Joe Montana who feel that way right now.
That their arms, that Joe didn't have much stronger arm than Brock.
No.
What he had was pinpoint accuracy. What Bill told me was that one time he was, I've told you this, watching tape because he was doing some promotion, and he called me and he said, Lowell, every throw by Joe was just exactly where it had to be. And there was love in his voice. Right. And I think we're seeing that with this kid. Now, we may not see it forever, but we're seeing it now. I think his arm is strong enough. Now, it's very interesting. I've told this story, and Iggy knows the story. Bill was always thinking of trading Joe. His mind was all over the place. Mm-hmm. And he and Al Davis were close. I'm not saying they liked each other.
He worked for Al. He worked for Al.
He worked for Al, yeah.
He coached on the Raiders.
But it didn't end well.
No.
He wanted more money, and Al wouldn't give it to him. And he went and did a semi-pro team. And Al used to hold that against him.
Yeah.
So they were close, but I don't know that they liked each other. In fact, I would say Al liked Bill more than Bill liked Al.
Right.
Anyway, he was always trying to trade Joe. Why? I don't know. And he never did. So he called Al and he said, would you be interested in Joe? And Al said, send me some tape. And Bill sent him some tape, and Al called him up and said, he's not good for the Raiders. My wide receivers will outrun his arm.
Yep.
Because they were always taking the deep shot and the fast deep shot.
Right.
And that's not what Bill did. Bill was very conservative, and Joe couldn't do that. But Al said, but I'd like Steve Young. And Bill said, no deal on Steve Young. Yeah. So in certain offenses, like the Raiders then, I don't know what the hell the Raiders are doing now, and nor do I care. But for the typical Raiders, the big play, I don't think Brock Purdy would be the quarterback for them. No. But for what they do, I think he could fit in here the way Joe Montana fit in with Bill.
Yeah, and I think with both cases, like Joe Montana and Brock Purdy, it doesn't mean they never threw the ball deep. You
That's
can watch
right.
clips of Joe Montana hitting, 40, 50-yard passes down the field. You don't need a guy to throw the ball 70, 80 yards. Where the lack of arm strength will come is like, a 15, 20-yard out across the field on a line. That's the kind of throw that Trey Lance could make, Colin Kaepernick could make. These guys won't, but there's so many other things you can do besides that. I mean, Bill Walsh won a bunch of Super Bowls that way with Joe Montana. It can be done. So, yes, his arm is strong enough. And it, to me, looks like it's gotten stronger since college, and that arms can continue to get stronger. If he goes and works on his mechanics, works on his strength, he could keep developing.
I think arm strength for him is now a non-issue.
I agree.
Non-issue.
Here's my issue with Purdy, where I'm not concerned, but I guess interested. He's little. He looks smaller than they list him. I don't know what he really is, but when he's on the field, he looks smaller than Joe. He looks smaller than Jimmy. He looks smaller than Jeff Garcia. He looks like if he gets hit hard, I'm worried about him. And the thing about him is he's very athletic. He's much more mobile than I thought. And he can really make people miss. So he does this move where he's in the pocket and someone will be coming to hit him, and at the very last minute, he'll spin away and run out the back of the pocket, which is hard to do. He better be careful with that. I almost feel like that's a bad habit, and all it takes is you running out of the back of the pocket one time when you run into someone and get splattered, and I hope it doesn't happen because he looks small. And if he gets hurt like that running around, well, then that'll give Trey Lance his opportunity to take the job. So that's the one thing I'm concerned about.
Do you think he's 6 feet tall?
They list him at 6 feet and 1/2 inch, which is exactly what I am. And I stand there sizing him up, and I'm thinking, yeah, we're about the same size. And I don't feel like I'm big enough to play quarterback in the NFL, so I'm a little concerned about him. I mean, Jeff Garcia was small too, but he was muscled up and like 30, 31, 32 when he was the Niners quarterback. This guy is little. He looks like a kid. He looks like Steph Curry, but smaller.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. So that's the one thing I want to see. If he keeps running around in the playoffs against defenses that start to have some tendencies and know that he wants to back out of is he going to get himself in trouble? I hope not. So far, he's a lot of fun to watch running around.
I love watching him play. Again, there are certain quarterbacks. Again, you're not rooting, but Russell Wilson no longer.
No.
But when he was good up in Seattle, he was so dramatic. I loved watching him play. I did. And Iggy, I love watching Drew Brees play.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, Purdy's a lot like Russell Wilson, a young Russell Wilson. He comes on a team. You didn't expect him to be the guy. He's really, really cheap. But, man, he's a playmaker. He moves really well and gets the ball down the field. End of story.
Yeah.
Now, Purdy doesn't have – Russell Wilson had one of the best deep balls I've ever seen. Very strong arm. Purdy doesn't have that, but he's a better pocket quarterback than Russell Wilson ever was, which is very interesting.
And I think he reads defenses better.
I don't think Russell Wilson particularly read defenses. I think that's what we're learning. I think we're learning that he handed off a lot and would scramble around and make things happen on his own, and the Seahawks allowed him to do it until they didn't. And I think Purdy can do more than that.
I agree. Yeah.
So he's a lot of fun.
It's interesting, Iggy, how positive we are about Purdy. It's fun. It's fun. As I say, enjoy it. Go along for the ride.
Right. And I think I've been so negative about the Niners for so long, and part of it was just me feeling like, look, they could trade for Christian McCaffrey. They could have the number one defense. They could have Deebo Samuel, all these. As long as the Jimmy Garoppolo's their quarterback, I don't believe they're going to win the Super Bowl. And now all of that negativity is gone. He's gone. It's Brock Purdy, and I don't necessarily feel that he can't win a Super Bowl. I feel like, actually, if they don't win a Super Bowl, it might be because of something on the defense and not the offense.
Iggy, if they don't win a Super Bowl, and this, I don't know if we have it in our list of things to talk about. There's a big issue out there, and it's Kyle.
Ooh, there is that.
And this is where we come back to mythology or even tragedy.
Right.
In tragedy, you make the same mistake over again. It's your fate to make a mistake. Like when I was at Stanford, I did my doctorate on Joseph Conrad, and my favorite novel by him is Lord Jim, which is, I'm not recommending it for you guys, but it was a book I loved when I was in my 20s, and I don't read anymore. But Jim makes the same mistake again. It's his fate. It's a tragic novel, and he dies at the end. And what happens with Shanahan is he's really great. He's really brilliant. He has his team playing now. But in 2 Super Bowls, and
an NFC Championship.
He screwed it. And no matter what he says, you can look at the tape, and he made blunders. He was not up to the critical moment, to what Iggy and I call the crisis moment.
It's true.
And so if he gets to this Super Bowl, when it comes to the fourth quarter, and if it's a close game, what I'm thinking about is, what is Kyle thinking? What is he doing? And we won't know this till the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl. I'm not saying he's going to fail. I'm not saying he's Lord Jim. I'm saying he needs to prove he's not.
It's true.
And so that's the unknown going forward. And again, Iggy, it gives a tragic cast to the season, potential tragic, which I find fascinating. I'm not saying he'll fail, but I want to know.
Right. Because again, he's had better offenses than this one. He had Matt Ryan as the MVP in 2016. And in the Super Bowl, they scored 21 points on offense. They got another touchdown on a pick six, but that great, like I think it was a top 10 offense of all time in the league. 21 points, they lost. Now the defense crumbled too, but 21 points. Then in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, 20 points, they lost. Then in the NFC Championship game last year, 17 points, they lost. He can have all this talent. He can have an offense that's rolling, but at the crisis, at the finish line, he tops out at 20 points, and it's not enough. So I don't know if they can beat Kansas City in the Super Bowl with 20 points. They couldn't 3 years ago. I don't know if you can do it now.
And Iggy, he loses leads.
He loses leads. The identity. He loses his entire rhythm or whatever you want. He loses his mind.
Yeah. So look, I want to be real clear. We don't want to be negative. We've been very positive in this show, but you're talking about the Super Bowl. The stakes are very high, and what could hold them back? Well, one of the things is the head coach, and he has a history of holding back. a team. He has a history of, I'm going to call it in the sense of the NFL, if you can call anything tragic, a story tragic. He's had tragedy, and the story of this season could be, can he get past tragedy, i.e., Joe Louis got knocked out by Max Schmeling. That was tragedy. It was a big deal. He came back in another fight and knocked Schmeling out in the first round. He redeemed himself. Redemption stories are wonderful, and I hope Kyle has one as well.
Right, and it's so instead of the question, we let off this section with, is Brock Purdy's arm strong enough? Which means, is he good enough to win the Super Bowl? Now we're finishing off the section by saying, really the question is Kyle Shanahan good enough? Is he poised enough? We feel like the 23-year-old rookie quarterback is poised enough and good enough to win the Super Bowl. What about the 43-year-old head coach who has scar tissue in these moments? Brock doesn't have that.
Yes. It's interesting how this evolved, this conversation.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not putting down Kyle. All of these questions make it fascinating for me.
Right.
So I'm interested, but it's something he has to get past.
Again, we're not covering like the 1988 49ers or the Warriors. This is not a championship team. This is a team that should be a championship team.
Yes.
Has come close, and they might finally break through this year, or not. This might the story of this team could be a team that came close and was one of the best teams but never broke through, or this could be the year. I mean, it's very interesting.
This could be the year, and if it is the year, it's glorious.
It's glorious.
It's glorious. Yeah.
And well put. Does Kyle have trust issues with himself?
Yes. I think that's another way of saying what we said. Yes.
Yes.
He seems to have had in the past, and I'd like to see him get over them.
He's like Superman and Lex Luthor at the same time.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Hey, Iggy.
Yeah.
You know, because I've been sick. I've been sick now for 2 weeks. I don't watch much TV, but I watch old movies, and I've been watching a lot of Batman movies. And I have a question for you, okay?
I tweeted about this last night, but let's talk about it.
Okay, I didn't see it. I was just probably in bed coughing.
Yeah.
Big-time directors have made very good Batman movies.
Yes.
And I don't think there's a Superman movie at the level of the Michael Keaton or the Christian Bale Batman movies. Yeah. Why are serious directors more interested in Batman than Superman?
That's a good question. Batman's a better character. He's a better character than Superman, I think. Some people like Superman. There's a really great defense of Superman in Kill Bill. But to me, what's so interesting about Batman is he's not a superhero. He's not a superhero at all. He's a clever, rich guy who's in great shape and has all the gadgets and wants to be a superhero, but there's nothing super about him. And also, I think the other thing that's great about him is that the Joker is a great villain. Great villain. Lex Luthor is not as good as the Joker, in my opinion.
So his antagonist is better. You know, in fact, last night I watched The Dark Knight, and it was Heath Ledger as the Joker. Iggy, that poor guy, he died, he was 28. His portrayal of the Joker was a great, great performance. In fact, it overshadowed Christian Bale.
Yeah, it's the best thing in that Christopher Nolan trilogy. Actually, I think Christian Bale's performance of Batman was overly serious and almost ridiculous at times. His voice for Batman make me laugh. I'll be watching this and just start giggling like he can't be serious with his voice right now. Can't be serious. But Heath Ledger was great. And I liked Christopher Nolan, who did Memento. Great. I liked his whole idea.
That's a wonderful movie.
Yes. And I liked his idea of going the opposite direction of the Tim Burton. Instead of making it campy and cartoony, make it really realistic, because you could do that with Batman. You could almost see Batman being a real person. There's nothing realistic about Superman ever.
I got it.
Can't do that.
Now, I want to remind you that my Uncle Bob, my cousin Allison's father, he was one of the Superman writers. He didn't invent Superman, but he was on the staff of DC. Was it DC Comics or Marvel? I don't know what they were. But he was on the staff, and he had a little office in his house in Long Island. And I would go, and, you know, there'd be dialogue, Superman or Lois Lane. And it was kind of cool to see that on his typewriter. And then it would show up in the comic books.
What I really like about Superman is that unlike Bruce Wayne is a super millionaire that you can't really relate to as a bunch of toys. Like Superman's an alien, and he comes to the Earth and tries to fit in, and he's a goofball. He doesn't have much confidence. Like Clark Kent, doesn't really get how to fit in, and it's kind of funny to see an alien's comment on our society and what it would mean to be normal.
And also, he had a vulnerability to Krypton,
right?
Because the story of a great hero, and we're coming back to Kyle, is what makes them interesting is the vulnerability.
So he's Achilles.
They're all Achilles.
Right.
Achilles was the greatest warrior in the Trojan War, but he had
That's true.
at his heel, he had a vulnerability. And what makes great heroes interesting is their vulnerability.
What's Batman's vulnerability?
Oh, that you can kill him.
Yeah, he's not.
He can get killed.
Not a super. You can kill him.
Yeah, he can get killed.
Can't fly. You can kill him. Also, he's not willing to go as far as the Joker. The Joker's always willing to go further than him. So, Batman has to work within the confines of the law
and the moral code. He has a moral code.
And the moral code. Yes.
Because he's on the side of good.
As opposed to anti-heroes such as the Punisher, who you probably don't know as much of. That's Marvel.
I don't know the Punisher.
He'll kill you. He will kill you. But, I mean, that's a lot of, Elmore Leonard's anti-heroes, too. Justified.
Yeah.
Justified. Anyway, I really like this conversation. This was a fun one. Mike says, Kyle Shanahan has Atlanta Super Bowl PTSD. Used to be super aggressive. I do think there's a little PTSD in his psyche. But, Andy Reid lost a lot of NFC Championship games. He lost in the Super Bowl. He was a high-level loser until he got Patrick Mahomes, and then everything changed. Right. So maybe this is Kyle's destiny, is to get a quarterback who can exercise the demons.